The first question is, how do you see your businesses, or how do you explain the concept of scaling a business using your cases and your businesses? So JP, for example, you have more than one business, right?
Yeah, I suppose I think the hardest thing about scaling your business is trying to stay true to the principles that you started out with. I think it's the most difficult, because I think there's many businesses that I know of that started out as one thing and became another because of scaling up. Because I suppose the natural tendency is always to make things bigger. I don't know if it's just an illness or a condition that we have, but we always want to make things bigger. While that's okay, sometimes it's important to try and stay small, and like a bit like what Mette was saying yesterday, is how much do you need, and how much do you need to, if you have a product or a restaurant, does it need to be local or national or international? And I think it's, once you go beyond a certain framework, it's very, very hard to stay true to your own philosophy. And I suppose the way we do it is I suppose we open different things that are in themselves little small versions. I mean, I could have easily opened up 10 Cavas easily. We had offers to open Cava in Dubai and London and Paris, and I said, I don't think this is what we want. I don't think we opened up Cava to multiply it and scale it up. That's not that I don't want it to grow, but if what I always want when I do something else, I always prefer to do another thing. And it's still part of the same process. We're still growing, but it's not. We're not manufacturing. We're not taking an idea from its our organic origins and then just multiplying it ad infinitum just to make money. Because I mean, I suppose if I always think, and other people might argue, but I always think you either make food or you make money, and it's unfortunately the two of them don't go together.
So yesterday we were talking with Mette and Fleming that the thing is not to copy and paste the business. It's just the philosophy that brings you to do something, maybe to grow the business. And what about you, Alejandro and Nono?
Pues a nosotros nos han dicho que puede hablar en inglés, pero en español nos expresamos mejor. Entonces, claro, una empresa como las nuestras, la nuestra que concretamente es muy pequeña, claro, nosotros no tenemos una junta de accionistas en los que nos están presionando constantemente para ganar pasta, ¿no? Entonces, pero claro, si te quedas tranquilo, te puedes quedar en la autocomplacencia y al final eso acaba arruinando tu negocio. Hay que siempre tratar de crecer para no morir. O sea, es una cosa muy curiosa. Y luego, claro, nuestra empresa somos 2 socios. Tenemos que consensuarlo mucho porque tenemos diferentes necesidades, tenemos diferentes ambiciones, etc. Entonces, nosotros, para un negocio como la nuestra, la tienda online ahora mismo está basada en España. Nuestro objetivo es equivocarnos en España, aprender mucho en España, para luego poder saltar a otros países. Claro, saltar a otros países significa no hacer un copy and paste, porque es que un francés es completamente diferente a un español. O sea, para empezar, buscan otras cosas, buscan que la web sea muy diferente a la española porque les interesan más pues, los sellos ecológicos que las fotos chulas en Instagram. O sea, son cosas muy diferentes. Necesitas gente francesa para responder a esos clientes franceses en su idioma. Lo mismo con Alemania. Entonces, claro, no podemos, aunque sí, tenemos abierta nuestra página web a Alemania, a clientes daneses, a clientes ingleses, pero no hacemos el esfuerzo, porque cuando queramos hacer el esfuerzo igual que en España tenemos que saber responder a esa demanda. Entonces, no nos volvamos locos en crecer, sí, lo hemos dejado abierto. Hemos dejado abierta la posibilidad de comprar, que un cliente danés, un cliente italiano pueda comprar nuestra caja, y han venido clientes así, pero bueno, no es lo habitual realmente. Cuando queramos hacerlo hay que hacer muchas más cosas y tendremos que ir país por país.
And another question, how did you decide that your business had the character or not to be scaled, to be grown up? Anybody?
Sí, sí, claro. Al final, esto es muy sencillo. Nosotros estamos basados, sabemos que los franceses y los alemanes consumen más aguacate y más mango que los españoles. Entonces, es fácil, los números dicen que hay un mercado allí. Entonces, es simplemente poner los recursos a trabajar para captar esos clientes en Francia. Al final, una tienda online funciona, la parte más difícil es captar, porque para fidelizar con el producto que tenemos y si tratamos de dar un mínimo servicio de calidad, ya se convierte en un cliente recurrente. Entonces, nuestra escala al final equivale a poner a uno o dos empleados más en cada país para poder dar esos servicios mínimos para que el servicio al cliente sea fundamental.
JP, what about you? How did you decide that you were not going to replicate, for example, Cava?
I suppose it comes down to like a personal vision or personal philosophy, and I think that to try and do something unique and to maintain the experience that for me that is so important in terms of the food. So like if you replicate something, I think you were saying about cut and pasted, or you provide a simulation of that experience. And like for me, that Cava is unique to Galway. And that's not to say that if I opened up another tapas bar somewhere else, I think it wouldn't be Cava. I think it would be something else. And funnily enough, after 5 years, we had to close. We had to close Cava, and we reopened it a year later. But we weren't going to reopen it at all. I was going to do something completely new. But the bank said, well, we'll help you open the restaurant if you open up Cava again. And that was the first time. If the bank offers you money, you're supposed to usually take it because they don't normally give you money. Yeah, so that was one of the reasons. But I suppose for me, there are so many different possibilities with food. Like why do the same thing over and over again? I don't understand. Or maybe it's just personally I'm too restless to just say, okay, I'm going to be happy with making one restaurant and just multiply that restaurant and keep people going. That's why we did an ear and why we did the gastropub, and hopefully we will do a new project. And again, I think it's a personal decision, and it's not for everyone because some people, I suppose, want to have a comfortable life. And as my wife says, we could have bought a house in France, but we opened up a Michelin star restaurant, so that was our choice. But again, I think it comes down to personality. It comes down to the product. I mean, some things are worthwhile to expand and enlarge if you can keep to the same principles. I can't see how we would do that without compromising our integrity. And I think in the food business, particularly at the level that we're at, when you put every emphasis on your philosophy, then all you have is integrity. So if I preach about working with local farmers, and then I open up 10 cavas, and all of a sudden we're dealing with a huge big meat factory, then it's, as I said, it just becomes like empty marketing, which is like what you have, a lot of empty marketing with a lot of bigger businesses that I think use the language of local food. They use the language of the image of the farmer, the image of the field, and it's just there to make people buy things as opposed to having any content behind it. And I think to have content behind what you do, you need to outline what your principles are, and then know your limits. And I think and that's the difficulty with if you're an artisan producer and then you get the opportunity to make like 1 million units. Like it's not only a problem of quantity, it's also like a philosophical problem. I mean, are you still an artisan cheesemaker if you make 1 million units of cheese? Is it the same recipe? Like it's, and you send it all over the world. Is it still artisan? And that's like it's really complex, and even though you might think, oh, that's not really a relevant question, it's very relevant when you try and defend artisan, and then you need a law to defend artisan, and they've just passed a law in Ireland defending, like a law that outlines artisan. But most, I mean, other than the word organic, no other words have legal definition. I mean, local has no legal definition, artisan has no legal definition. So that's, if you don't define them, then you let them open for everything, and that's the I suppose the difficult thing.
And no.
Yo coincido con JP también, porque realmente, y voy aquí a hacer de un poco de profe de marketing, me permitís, pero yo creo que la clave precisamente está en saber cuál es tu valor añadido, conocer muy bien cuál es tu capacidad, cuál es el posicionamiento que tú quieres tener en la mente de ese cliente o ese consumidor por el que vas, y que, por supuesto, sepas hacerlo bien y seas diferente al resto. Esa es la clave para empezar, porque si tú te lanzas a un mercado donde hay tantísima oferta, como no ofrezcas algo diferente al cliente, ese cliente no va a cambiar. Con lo cual, yo creo que hay muchas cosas que se pueden copiar. Por ejemplo, nosotros no invertimos mucho tiempo en desarrollar nuestra tienda de e-commerce. Nosotros copiamos a los mejores. Lamejornaranja.com es una tienda que lleva vendiendo naranjas 15 años. Habían pasado por ese proceso y se han dado de cabeza contra cómo hacer un proceso de compra perfecto para que nosotros vengamos ahora a reinventarlo. ¿Entender? Entonces, ahí no invertimos mucho tiempo, ahí sí que copiamos. Pero luego lo que teníamos claro desde un principio es que lo que teníamos que trasladar a nuestros clientes y la comunicación tenía que ser muy diferente a lo que existía. Y siempre potenciar, pues eso, cuál es nuestra diferencia, nuestro valor añadido. En nuestro caso, oye, somos los agricultores y te vamos a llevar la fruta del árbol a tu casa. Eso es lo que nosotros intentamos trasladar y eso es lo que no puede imitar tanta gente. Entonces, ahí hacemos los esfuerzos en comunicar, en trasladar al cliente, ¿no? Y creo que no hay que obsesionarse con, muchas veces, oye, no voy a arrancar porque quiero hacerlo perfecto. Nada es perfecto cuando empieza. Va a evolucionar. Nuestra web nunca ha muerto, siempre está viva. Porque aprendemos de nuestros clientes. Pero si no la tienes, nunca puedes empezar a testar y a coger esa información. Entiendo que pasará lo mismo en un restaurante, en cualquier negocio, ¿no? Arranca, prueba, que sean los clientes los que te den ese feedback y, sobre todo, no pierdas el foco de aquello que te diferencia del resto. Teniendo claro eso, creo que la evolución siempre será positiva.
Mette Fleming, would you like to add anything?
I always have this message about really just looking into what's your purpose of, for example, growing. I see perfectly clear for a business like yours, that's the business that would, of course, have a goal to grow to a certain extent, at least, because you have a piece of software, and the more that software is used, of course, that's the purpose of spending money on developing something that can handle a lot of people at the time, customers. But for a restaurant, for example, sometimes I think it's good for restaurateurs, chefs, to just consider, okay, what's my motivation actually to grow? Because we live in a world today where there's, I'm sorry to say it, too much growth. Growth is a paradigm that has been on for so long because it came out of a world where we really needed it, but right now we don't need all this growth. What we need is to take better care of ourselves and the planet and a lot of things. So I'm not one of these people who are saying, whatever you do in your business, make sure it grows. It has to grow all the time. We have to make more money all the time, because sometimes making a big, not a big turnover, but just having, having a business that is, that's where a lot of money is running through. It's not the same as actually having the money you need for what you want. So, so for restaurateurs and chefs, I think it's very important to always ask yourself, okay, is it out of curiosity that I want to work? Like I know that that JP, you're a very curious person. So you and like Christian Puglisi is a very curious person who opened a new restaurant because I want to discover this field. This is like our playground. So making a restaurant chain that's going in different direction, it makes you learn something new as a person, and that's a good motivation to grow. Is it because I just want to have freedom, like I was talking about yesterday? If you build up an organization where you have people to take care of the things that you don't want to do, then you have more freedom to go out and do what you want to do. That's also a good thing about growing a business, that you don't have to do, like for example, if you're a man, a husband, wife, a restaurant, then you have to do everything. That's for someone, but not for all of us. So always investigate what's actually my reason to grow. And sometimes you will find out that the reasons are not good enough, because what you really want is the freedom it gives you to only work, for example, a few days every week. Then you should open an event company. Then you should do weddings where you make 10,000 euros for a job. That's what we did, at least one time when we had a restaurant with 20 employees, and it all was too much, and then we closed it down, and then we said, okay, no employees, no nothing. We just want to downscale it, because sometimes downscaling is actually the answer to what you want. Sometimes it's the thing that gives you the freedom to spend time with your kids and give you the money to go on ski vacations like you love, and give you the freedom to discover new ways of satisfying your curiosity. For example, you can learn things by reading or whatever you're interested in. So, yeah, that's just a little add-on. Growing is not. I don't think growing is always like. Don't focus so much on growth all the time.
I think I think definitely the reasons why one would grow are more important than just growing. I think there is a tendency, just I suppose because we're in a hyper capitalist mode of thinking all of the time, of consuming and producing and consuming and producing, that to think about why would I grow. And I mean, I think for me, I don't open up more restaurants to make more money. I mean, if you want to make money, you open up one good restaurant that does a particular type of food, and then you'll make enough money. I think for me, maybe it's that curiosity. It's that like, well, what would it be like to open this place or that place? And when I look at Christian's restaurants, or I look at Albert Adria's restaurants, for me, they're inspiring because they're all different. And I go, God, that's really great to look at Mexican food and investigate that. And I mean, that's probably my interest in growing is more from being interested in things as opposed to trying to take more of the market share or compete. And it's different, I know, with every product it's different. Some products are designed to grow, and they will be better if they grow. I mean, if you're selling organic vegetables and then you sell them online and you have 10 units and then you have 100 and then you have 1,000, that's good growth. I mean, some growth is good. I think it's just the integrity behind that growth. If it's just growing for its own sake, that has money, then I think that it needs to have more weight. Money will always be there. It's necessary. But if it's the only motivation, then yeah, you can probably make money easy. Like, food is the last place you want to make money. If you want to make a load of money, food is the last place you want to go. I mean, there's better places to make money.
Medicine.
In food. But food is a passion, and it's a love, and I think food is more a lifestyle. And particularly the farmers that we work with, I mean, all of them work 7 days a week, all of the time, and they're happy out. And I suppose they want to grow to a certain size where they can be happy, and then I have 3 or 4 employees, like what Ronan says. We have like many more, but I think it's, again, I think it's really trying to sit down and think about what you're going to do if you have a food concept, whether it's something online or whether it's something tangible. Make sure that you have money to make sure that you have the comfort there. But if money is in the center, then I think then that's the mistake we make. You need to put food in the center, and money will go around that, because I think that's where you get culture and happiness and family and things that friends and like all of those things that come from food. And food is just a vehicle for us to communicate with each other and us to live. That's what food is.
Okay. So I think we have a question, and then Fleming would like to add something.
Buenos días. Es una pena que no podamos preguntar en euskera.
Ya, la próxima.
Positiva, ¿eh? Bueno, yo soy un productor de un cerdo autóctono aquí del País Vasco. Y bueno, tenemos un producto de la tierra y aprovecho para reivindicar que no oigo en ningunos foros, bueno, que somos vascos, que somos un territorio propio y tenemos nuestra identidad ante grandes estados y queremos lograrlo. Perdonad por la... Pero bueno, era preguntar más que nada, ya que estabais hablando por el dinero, a mí me surge la duda de que, bueno, hay restauradores, hay luego tiendas online y todo eso. A mí me resulta difícil atreverme incluso a cuando, siendo productor, a llegar a los tratos, al final, con la gente que vive del mundo de la restauración o tiendas o eso. ¿Qué claves usáis para llegar a tratos o para llegar a... no sé cómo explicarlo.
Acuerdos.
A acuerdos económicos, y estoy totalmente de acuerdo con la filosofía de Meter y de estos, que todavía lo de crecer no estoy de acuerdo, pero sí es verdad también que tiene que ser proyectos viables y tiene que haber liquidez. Y bueno, me da miedo a la hora de hacer los pasos, de a ver qué cláusulas usáis, igual es una pregunta estúpida, pero bueno, me interesa mucho oír diferentes opiniones sobre eso.
Muy bien.
Soy productor de un cerdo, de una raza autóctona, de lo que es de la zona del Pirineo de aquí, de la parte vasco-francesa y luego de la zona sur del País Vasco también.
Sí, de carne.
Productor de carne y tenemos un producto de mucha calidad, sin ningún tipo de aditivo sintético químico. Sí. En el mercado un producto auténtico, pero bueno, tiene sus dificultades, sobre todo con los productos andaluces, que hablando de identidades y eso, pues al englobar el tema español, pues nos coméis la tostada. Es verdad que lleváis años y tenéis un producto muy bueno, pero con la identidad encima los coméis. Entonces ahí tenemos, bueno...
Y de cerdo él sabe un rato, tiene tatuado.
Todo es riqueza, me siento una persona universal también, hay que decirlo también.
So,
de cerdos, you know a little bit about pigs. I mean, you have it here.
Do you want to go first, or I? No, for me, I suppose it depends on. You need to look at what is the price of your product, and that will determine your market. I mean, the farmers that we deal with, one of our pork producers is very similar to yourself. I think his pork is 2-3 times more expensive than the regular pork, sometimes 4, and we use it, and I suppose we started to when we started to use it, there was a big educational process with our customers, because you're saying this is more expensive, this pork is, because this pork is free range, this pork is organic, and that takes a while, that takes a long time. But for me, I think it's about developing personal relationships with certain restaurants. And sometimes it takes a long time. I mean, we still have one lamb producer, and we're the only restaurant in town that uses lamb. He sells whole lamb. They're from like 40 miles down the road, and no one else is buying his lamb. It's more expensive. It's smaller. All I can continue to do is buy Bernard's lamb and then tell people about it and say this is a really good product to use. I think also when you have a really good product, if it's pork or if it's lamb, and you buy it whole or you buy it halved, I think you get more out of that product. So I think it's, for me, offering advice would be, I think the most important thing is to find like-minded people. So if you find people, it's a Basque pork, you find people promoting Basque food, and then you find those people that use your product, and then you develop, for me, a relationship with them, and then you use, like for me, like I use social media a lot to push the word out on that product, and we have the same problem in Ireland. Actually, from with Danish pork. Actually, not that I have anything against the Danish pigs, but unfortunately, it's cheaper to make pork in Denmark, and because of the free trade in the EU, then you can send pork anywhere you want, and that's fair trade is good in some senses and not in others, but you can't just take one side and throw out the other. So all I can do is say that I think we're in Ireland, we produce pork, we should use Irish pork. We don't produce avocados, okay, so we need to import avocados, but we kind of have everything backwards, that we just flood the market with everything from everywhere and then just leave it up to the people just to decide what to buy. But I think choosing what one's country is good at, whether it's pork or beef, and okay, we're not very good at, we don't have any oranges or lemons, so we need to produce them. But you can't stop stuff coming into the country because we're in the European Union. So we need to, I suppose, respect other countries. So if they want to sell their beef or their dairy in our country, it's a free choice. So education is really, really important.
I think that, like in Denmark 10, 15 years ago, I can say that the farmers who deliver to the best restaurants in Copenhagen today, they were not known 10, 15 years ago. And today they are stars, and their products are being produced or presented in the best possible way on the best restaurants. They get a lot of attention from the media. Their economy is better than the conventional farmers, and you can see that it's growing, and their products are being so appreciated. And I think the same will happen here. And I can see that the farmers doing organic and biodynamic quality products, they are happier people. They are more proud people. So I think just do what you do, and it will change and it will come.
I think so. Yeah.
But it's true, yes, that approaching restaurants is a good idea.
Yeah.
But I don't know so much about the restaurants here. I just know how it works. In our part of the world, it's definitely a good way in our part of the world to sort of just email a restaurateur, call, visit a person with a restaurant that you share value with, who is interested in a good product. And then when that person starts, I don't know, does it help what I'm saying?
Well, I can actually say that a farm that we work very closely together with, they actually a guy who was in the marketing business, he actually approached them. He came from the same region, and he was tired of doing his marketing sales stuff for a big company, and approached them. And now he is their freight person, and he is their salesperson too. And it's just out of interest, actually. And he just goes to the very good restaurants with samples, saying, "Hey, try these, what's in season at that time."
Samples always.
Yeah.
I think
So he just goes in and knocks on the door, gives them stuff, tell the story, and they have increased sales very, very significantly.
I think
significantly
finding a
sometimes.
restaurant or a chef or that doesn't ask you about the price is
Yeah.
the most important.
Yeah.
The price is the last thing I consider. If a product is good, it's good. I mean, if it's my job to sell that product, and if I need to charge more, or if I need to accept that I'll make less money, then that's my issue. But my issue is never to negotiate with the farmer, ever. I don't ring Brendan and say, "Your lamb is too expensive, I need cheaper lamb." That's my job to sell his lamb at the price. I know he's selling it at a level where he needs to survive, and I don't. There's a trust there on his side and on my side. Our chicken farmer, we buy our 3 restaurants. We buy 10% of his. He only kills 300 chickens a week, which is like nothing. We buy 30 a week, and so we contribute to his staff. One of our producers built their a glass house on the back of us just buying their vegetables for a year, just one guy. And so it was nice when he brought me out and he said, "Look, this glass house, I built this from the vegetables that you bought from me. And now he makes more. And then he makes more and he goes into another restaurant. But I think it's about knowing how much we need. And like if you look at your pork and you go, okay, I need 15 restaurants to make this work, then I think finding those 15 restaurants, or I only need 5, or I need 10. I want to only focus in the Basque region. I think branding is vital for any small business to give it that added value. I always say to my producers, you need to brand it. You need a logo. You need a strong story, because otherwise you will not distinguish. And it's not about you need a logo because you need to make your product look cool. You need a logo to differentiate, and then you see that logo and people recognize it and put value in that. Our lamb guy still brings the lamb in a white bag in the back of the car, and I'm going, Brendan, would you get a logo on the? Because it's like if you package it, you will sell it more rather than going, do you want a lamb? It's in a bag and it's chopped up. Like if you packaging is really, really important, and it's as important as making a really good product. And never think of it as separate just because you're a producer or a farmer. You need to say, well, what do I want my logo to say about me? Or using media, photography, and video. All of these things are vital to grow a small business and to say we can compete with the likes of any other business.
And I have a little tip. If you need to make a logo and you're a startup company, you don't have any money, go to Fiverr.com. There you can have a logo for $5. So it's just a tip that's really useful, I think.
And the thing is that many farmers, they are really focused on their product. They're very focused on the soil or whatever it is. But many of them, and it's said out of love because I have many good friends who are farmers, but many of them are not good salespeople. So it is not enough making a good product. It should be, but the fact is that it is not enough. So definitely focusing on telling the story, small video clips with a smartphone, whatever. People like to see happy pigs.
But it doesn't have to be you. It doesn't. I've
No.
got plenty of friends that are not good at those things, and everybody knows somebody who will either help them with a logo, help them with a website, help them make a little video. And that's the same as I was saying this morning when people ask me, how do I do everything? You find people that are better at you than doing things. I mean, my sister's a graphic designer. She's better than designing. If I want something designed, to go to her. I might draw something out, but the last thing I would do is design something. So knowing that you're not the best person is sometimes a good thing. It's about finding people around you that can produce your vision. And if you have a pig, you go, this is the best pig in the Basque Country. How do I tell people that? And that's so you need people to assist you, whether they're good at writing, good at photography. And in that case, then you have a collective. And that's what builds up a community. And that's how we deal with maybe 15 or 20 small producers. And I will never change. If someone else brings pork into me, I go, we have a pork producer. I don't care if it's cheaper. If someone else brings another pork product to me and says, this is a different type of pig and it's a different cut, then I will go, oh, this is interesting. But I think what's happening is we have too many of the same producers. And so everybody is competing and lowering their price. And I think what we need to do as restaurateurs or chefs or producers is to say, this is my product, this is the one I make. I make it because of this, and then I'm going to add value to it. Not that this is pork and I'll do it for the best price I can. Because the last thing you need to, if you start talking about price the minute you go in, then you're not talking about your product.
No.
Yeah.
Bueno, yo simplemente tres consejos muy prácticos, ¿vale? Uno, primero entérate de quien te vaya a comprar, por qué te compra. Eso es fundamental, ¿vale? ¿Por qué esa carne es mejor que otra? Que te lo diga un cocinero, que te lo diga el cliente que te va a comprar. No lo digas en tus palabras. Tienes que empatizar, ponerte la chaqueta de tu cliente y hablar su mismo lenguaje. Con esa información tú puedes empezar a construir una marca, como han dicho, fundamental. Es lo que te va a diferenciar del resto, lo he dicho antes. Es ese valor añadido que va a hacer que tú tengas algo más que alguien que tiene esa misma carne. Y a partir de ahí, macho, cara y tocar muchas puertas. Mira, Alejandro y yo hemos venido cargando con 4 o 5 cajas de aguacates. ¿Por qué? Hombre, para enseñarlo, pero porque le estamos dando piezas a personas que sabemos que les puede interesar. Es decir, yo si fuera tú iría, si es posible que no sé, con unos buenos chuletones o una muestra de tu producto. Al final estás vendiendo algo que se come, lo tienen que probar. Si no llega, no vas a poder venderlo. Entonces, no te obsesiones con planes comerciales o activar canales muy complicados. Tú simplemente cuenta cómo eres tú y eso tienes que trasladarlo al resto. ¿Cómo? Pues créate una historia alrededor. Me parecen unos consejos fantásticos. Enseña dónde se crían esos cerdos. Explica por qué es tan bueno. Cuenta un testimonio de un cocinero que explique por qué compra tu cerdo y no otro. Y cuando consigas eso vas a tener muchas más puertas abiertas. Nosotros, por ejemplo, trabajamos con no sé si conocéis .mx, el primer restaurante mexicano que obtuvo una estrella Michelin en Europa. Nosotros desde que abrimos Exotic estábamos obsesionados en que probaran nuestros aguacates. ¿Por qué? Porque nosotros cuando vamos a un cocinero y le decimos, mire, es que son los aguacates que compra .mx, Roberto, tal. Claro, ¿qué mejor carta de presentación? No tienes que hablar tú, ya estás hablando el producto por sí solo. Que poder, estratégicamente te interesa abrir alguna puerta que te sirva luego para abrir otra. Consejos prácticos para que lo ejecutes. ¿De acuerdo?
Okay, I think we have another question here.
Sí. Hola. Bueno, nosotros, muy brevemente, porque pues hicimos precisamente lo que hablabais antes de crecer, pues cambiamos unos trabajos en una gran ciudad bien pagados por un proyecto muy pequeño. Y yo y mi compañero hacemos pues pan en ecológico. Entonces ahora estamos en un punto que no queremos crecer mucho, pero queremos crecer un poquito incorporando a algún trabajador para que nos permita no ganar más dinero, pero sí pues tener el tiempo para probar nuevos productos, para otras cosas que no son solo pues el manufacturar o hacer el pan y repartirlo, que al final es nuestra actividad diaria. Entonces, esa parte de buscar un trabajador me parece la más difícil a la hora de crecer, un trabajador o 2 o 3 según el proyecto. La parte humana, pues os quería preguntar si tenéis algún consejo dentro de proyectos que no pretenden sacar el máximo rendimiento económico, pero sí pretenden pues seguir siendo un negocio familiar incorporando a alguien que no es de la familia. Entonces, no sé si tenéis algún consejo. Nos está resultando difícil.
Me?
Sí,
Bueno.
Well, I always have my weird advices, you know. When I have been at points where I thought, okay, attracting the right employees is just impossible. It never works. There's always something wrong. There's always something. It's really, really important also to remember that it's so expensive to have employees. If you make 1,000 euros and then you hire someone, then they have to make 2,000 euros to be worthwhile. It's a good little rule of thumb that an employee have to make double the amount that you make. At least in Denmark. Of course, maybe it's different here. Yeah.
I mean, of course, we are in this point where we can and we can grow a bit. We can grow a little bit and make this money for one employee. But the thing is, we want to be as comfortable as we are now. We want to give that person the confidence, but also ask that person, I don't know, this is a human part which is not easy when you don't have human resources.
I completely understand that you want to have someone. Exactly why I said the freedom that you have when you find the person who can take care of the things that you're not very good at. It's amazing. What I do when I try to attract a new employee is I write a list of what exactly do I want. I really, really make sure that I know what I want and not just, oh, it could basically be someone with loads of different skills. You know, I make sure that I know what kind of person, what kind of jobs do I want the person to take, and so on, so on, so on. Because when I'm clear about that, it seems that the person comes. It's just, I know it sounds crazy, but it just really works for me to do it like that. And I think the more clear you are about what your desire is, the more sure you are that you will find it. And then, of course, there's a lot of ways to find employees. Like, do you have an Instagram account? Do you use that?
Yes.
Yes. Social media, I mean, Facebook's social media, I think, is amazing for having people come from. Do you live here?
Well, I live in a small town, and the bakery is in an even smaller town. That's a little bit the point. We wanted someone from very close, but it's very few people there. So, well.
Yeah, but I mean, maybe you could consider like a person from very far away who want to discover Spain.
I think this is. I've similar people who are in like the sticks in the middle of Canada, and they have similar. They have no one around them, and they need people. And often, sometimes I think looking internationally for someone who wants to come and experience Spain, and sometimes not someone who even. I think we were talking about this yesterday. Like, you don't always have to find a baker to make bread. You could find someone who you can train. Some of my best chefs are people that just came in and had a passion for food. And sometimes they start washing the dishes, they do a bit on the floor, and they gradually, and then you find that they just really love food. And sometimes I think they're the easiest people to educate. Of course, chefs are brilliant, but sometimes, particularly if you have a very strong vision, and you want to communicate that vision to someone. Sometimes having someone who's very forthright is the last thing you need. But I think definitely social media and looking at an international thing, and if you have a position and you can offer accommodation or doing something where you don't necessarily have to pay them fully in money. And sometimes we do this where we pay accommodation and food. And then this helps us because we're a small restaurant, but it also helps them because they don't have to look for somewhere to live, and they get fed. So there's loads of different options, I think, and also looking at students who are in their final year everywhere. I mean, we have a Canadian chef at the moment that I met who was in his final year, and he came and did a 3 months apprenticeship, and now we've offered him a job for a year, and so just stuff like that. And I had no position for him 3 months ago, but he's stayed for 3 months and worked as an apprentice for free. But and it's just, I suppose there's loads of different dynamics, but always, I suppose, thinking outside the box and not looking for a baker nearby. I think looking for, I don't know, a plumber in somewhere else who doesn't want to plumb anymore. But I think, you find people who because I think everyone has a love of food, and once you find someone, who's interested.
Of course, it's nice to find someone in your own community if that's possible. But if it's not, then I think it's a very, very good idea to maybe consider this option of there's websites where people offer to come and work for you if you have maybe help them with a place to stay. Because if you're living in a tiny little village in Spain, that sounds like the most amazing thing for anyone who loves food, to come and just bake some bread and be in Spain. I mean, I know tons of people who love that.
We do this a lot in the growing industry with the woofers. My friend does this all the time. He has a bigger house, and he's a small producer, and sometimes he has 4 people staying with him, and they just help him pack stuff and deliver it, and they get to come and experience Ireland for 6 months, or I think it's really not. And none of them are trained producers or anything. They're just people who like traveling and experiencing food.
But I also hear you say that you are hunting this margin, these 10-15% extra, to make it affordable. Because now I guess it sounds like the economy is a little tight, so you need to do everything yourself.
Yeah, we do everything ourselves.
Yeah.
But the economy is okay. It's just enough. And that's why we think of someone else. But, well, I think the point is also what she was saying at the beginning, of thinking of what you exactly need. I mean, we've been trying with nice people, but we were not thinking of the job. We were thinking of nice people. And then sometimes I don't know, we also need experience, like training, and I just wanted some advice, some ideas to...
I think that working with nice people is definitely much more fun than working with skilled people who are not nice. So I think that is the right thing. But a thing that we have learned recently after having our own business for like 15, 20 years is that it's very, very important that you are very clear about what you expect and make sure that people understand that you expect that. So you don't do yourself a favor and you don't do your employees a favor by just being nice.
Yeah.
People like to know the rules and what's expected, and we are still in the process of learning that actually.
Yeah, I think this is basically the mistake, because we are a family and we are like, oh, welcome to our family, but
Yeah.
then, yeah. Well, thank you.
Yo añadiría solo
Sí.
alguien también que te pueda complementar, que sepa algo que tú tampoco sabes, porque eso es lo que te va a hacer también progresar. Muchas veces queremos contar con personas que son iguales que nosotros, que tienen nuestras mismas habilidades y muchas veces precisamente el acompañarte con gente que viene de otro mundo, de otra área, que te pueda aportar creatividad o que te pueda aportar otra forma de hacer las cosas, le da aire fresco a tu pequeña empresa, pero creces, ¿no? Evoluciona. Así que intenta no buscar una réplica tuya, una fotocopia, aunque sea una persona, por supuesto, y fíjate en las sensaciones, pero que pueda complementarte.
Gracias.
Okay, I don't know if there is any other question. Yes? Okay.
First of all, like, how did you manage and how was your first contact with producers? And besides that, and besides supply and demand, how do you know when it's right to move on from what you had before, like do a new restaurant or open a new project?
When your accountant starts to ring you
Yeah.
and starts to tell you to get out. I suppose I don't even know as a chef if it was I approached the farmer or they approached me. I can't remember, but I do have one particular memory of two of our farmers, Ronan and Brendan, coming to the door when we just opened Cava, and it was like, we sell chicken and we sell lamb, and I was like, okay, let's have a chat. And we've been dealing with them ever since, and they literally spent that day, and they went to one restaurant who was a friend of ours who sent them to another restaurant who sent them to us, and those three restaurants are still using those guys. So, and now I've put them on to 2 or 3 more. And a bit like you were saying with the avocado, it's about, I can say, no, Ronan's chickens are the best in the west of Ireland, absolutely. And if I say that, and then Ronan can use that, and then I'm happy for him, you know. I think, but yeah, I suppose, I mean, it's hard to know what is the chicken or the egg. It's the chef or the producer, the chef or the farmer. I think there was a moment where, I don't know, where 10 or 15 years ago it just seemed to click into place, where chefs became more and more interested in getting back to the earth, and farmers became more and more interested in trying to approach the chef. And maybe this is because we had this period in the 60s and 70s where things became very industrialized, the same as in Ireland as well. And what happened is that a huge big middle came between the producer and the chef, and it was like the factory. And then there was not only just one factory, they maybe had 2 factories. And before, where you were a farmer, you would kill your cow and then you would sell it locally. All the cows just went to a place where they were killed, and then they went to another place where they were chopped up, and then they were packed, and then they were sold. And I think it was probably just of that 60s. That still happens, but it certainly started in the 1960s in Ireland. And that was modernity, and that was the future, and we went with it. Everybody went with it, and I suppose we wanted to take a step back from that in the early 90s. But I think as like when to know is like, when do you know you've had enough? I think you'll probably feel it yourself when you know that it's not working anymore, and it's something. I mean, like, to be honest, I ask myself every day. I mean, it never goes away. Like, restaurants or the food industry is very volatile, and It's particularly when you're dealing with a really good product and it costs money to handle it, then you know when if you're not selling that product, and it's difficult sometimes to let go. And I mean, maybe we should have let go of Anir 3 or 4 years ago, but we keep it, and Anir would not survive without Cava. Like Cava is like the mothership that mines the other two. But yeah, I mean, someday we might have to make that choice. But it is very difficult because we have staff and we have suppliers, and you need to be loyal to them and take care of them. But I suppose ultimately, if you're losing money, I think you have a responsibility, because you're really spending somebody else's money. When you start to lose money in a big way, you're spending somebody else's money. If I take produce and then I can't pay for it, then there's a knock-on effect. So, I think not growing too fast is very important to not I suppose keep staying stable. Because if you grow very, very fast, you lose control of what you're doing. And I think growing really slowly is a way of keeping open for longer.
I can tell you what I did in the vegetables shop when I opened a local vegetables shop 7 years ago. Are you a chef? Yes. Are you planning to open a restaurant? Yes. This was Copenhagen in 2009-10, and it was not so normal to get produce straight from the farmers. So what I did was I made a lot of appointments with different farms, and I went out there and talked to them. And a lot of them thought I was crazy. They were like, we don't really do that, and I really had some convincing to do. So it was it's something that really does take a lot of time. And then also, I think you have to be very aware that it's, for us, it's the only way to do it. But it does take extra time. It does take extra time where sometimes you have to go out and pick, I don't know about, are you here from Spain? Colombia? Okay, I don't know anything about Colombia. Probably it's completely different there. You probably have markets everywhere and things like that. But anyway, over here it's a matter of really doing an effort to get the things, like going there yourself and calling loads of time to make sure that the farmers have the things ready that you need and stuff like that.
But working together with close together with the farmers, it's difficult, and it takes extra time, and sometimes they are delayed and you get irritated and all that. But the thing is, it's just as interesting visiting a veggie farmer than it is visiting a vineyard. And people, they move to France, or they travel to France to see the different wine producers and all that. I can get the same experience driving 50 kilometers and meet some fun, passionate people doing fantastic stuff. So it's really, really meaningful. And it's much more fun working in the kitchen and serving and all that when you have a good relationship and a good story to tell your guests and a better product. But it takes time, and it's really irritating sometimes.
It really is sometimes. Sometimes you really do feel that you're not the customer. Like, you're the one who has to do all more than the person who's actually selling you something. And this is also a message to you, the pork farmer. Are you on the line? Yes. Have you headphones on? It's really the really good producers really are the stars of the restaurants, and that's why they can sometimes be a little starstruck. What do you call it? What do you call it? They can have their little. They can be a little difficult to deal with, but they are so important. And
I think it makes it much more real. Like, the reality of food is that it's not always there all the time. We just invented that, and I'm trying to teach my chefs when farmers are a particular breed of people. They ring up and go, "I didn't kill any pigs this week. You're not going to have any. All right, see you." And then I'm going, "What do you mean? I have a restaurant and I have no pigs." But like that's up to me to deal with. And I think that is a good experience. I think then telling the chefs we have to change the menu, we're not going to have any pork. No, you cannot ring somebody else and just get it from a catalogue. But we have to learn that. Or something happened with my vegetables and I can't give you to them, they're not good. And that's the reality of food. And that's a good reality. And having to live with that. Or you get too much pork and you go, okay, let's put 5 pork things on the menu. I don't care if it's 5 pork things. And that's really, really, I think that's the honesty and the truth of food. I mean, Dan Barber speaks about his asparagus moment when they had too much asparagus and he put it all on the menu in Blue Hill. And yeah, I've done that, like where, I mean, who cares if you have duck 3 ways on the one menu? I mean, deal with it. Your customers, and I think it's really nice to be able to talk to them and say, well, look, I just use duck as an example, and we have 3 different ways, and we go, this is why we have it 3 different ways, because we buy the whole duck. We don't just buy the breast in a bit of plastic, or we get the pig and we get a half a pig or a quarter of a pig, and then we have loads, and it encourages the chefs as well to push themselves beyond buying the cut that they want all of the time, because that's not sustainable, buying the cut that they want. You really need to think about the whole animal. I think that's for me, that's what makes every day interesting. That's where fun is. Fun is in pushing yourself with food, not with ordering like whatever catalog number it is from whatever line of animal and just cooking it. That's not fun. Like, that's not a challenge. Challenge is to get a bit of meat that I don't know how to cook and go, what am I going to do with that? I've just spent 20 or 30 euro on a piece of an animal that I don't know what to do with. I need to do something with that. And I think that's good.
And the thing is, you will always end up loving it.
No, absolutely.
That's how it is.
Yeah, and I always say to my younger chefs, deal with it, you know? If I send them in 10 pig heads, I just go, deal with it. You're cooks, deal with it. And I don't want to see them in the cauldron when I come back. And that's good, because we fall into just habits that are just I suppose on a rota, and then we don't I suppose engage with food in a way that we prioritize other things, you know.
So I think we have 2 more questions, more or less, because we are almost out of time.
Hola, buenos días. Gracias por las charlas que habéis dado, me han encantado, las filosofías también. Y bueno, soy un productor local de aquí, que hago aromáticas medicinales, culinarias y hortícolas. ¿Qué pasa? Que soy autónomo, no soy empresa, no tengo un comercial y la huerta necesita su tiempo. Entonces, los cocineros, ¿tenéis tiempo para venir a la huerta y visitar? ¿Os gusta ver el producto en la huerta? ¿Es preferible que vaya yo a contar mi historia personalmente con mi... Es que es personal el proyecto, o sea, las plantas, la rescatación de autóctonas que he hecho, pues eso creo que mejor que un comercial lo puedo enseñar yo. Entonces, ¿qué es más conveniente? ¿Que vaya yo con mi producto y una tablet a donde vosotros los cocineros, o invitaros a los cocineros a mi cultivo? O es que tengo el producto muy bueno pero que no sale. No es porque el producto sea malo, sino por falta de tiempo, por falta de recursos, más que nada, ¿no? Y estamos diciendo que el productor pequeño es importante, en productos orgánicos son importantes, pero la realidad es que en los mercados de aquí el productor pequeño está jodido. Está jodido y no sale. Sacamos buen género, pero va al compost o sale infravalorado. Estamos vendiendo la lechuga a 0,60 en los mercados. Así no podemos vivir nosotros. Eso es la realidad de los mercados, ¿eh? Luego ya está, pues, el trabajo que tenemos que hacer con vosotros, pues, ahí falla algo que no sé y a ver si me podéis aclarar algo.
Maybe we can Alejandro or Nono can tell us from their perspective as another producer, what have they done?
Bueno, un poco en la misma línea que le comenta al compañero. ¿Quién crees tú que compra tu producto? ¿Quién crees que merece la pena dirigirte, enfocarte, porque entiendes que te va a ser menos costoso llegar? Entonces, a partir de ahí necesitas objetivos y estrategias. Y dirás, bueno, no me voy a meter en plan, no hay recursos. Bueno, pues tendrás que coger pues, un kit de tus plantas, no sé si se podrán llevar, y empezar echándole cara. Es decir, o te muestras a través de un canal online donde puedas llegar a mucha más gente, no sé si tu producto se puede llevar a cualquier punto de España. Entiendo que sí, muy bien. Bueno, pues a lo mejor tu problema es que te estás intentando focalizar aquí localmente y hay más competencia. Intenta abrir ese producto. Si es tan bueno, realmente habrá un público que lo demande. Intenta detectar quién es y dónde está. Y a partir de ahí, en función de los recursos que tengas, pues desde la visita personal, que es lo más caro, te va a costar además que te atienda un cocinero, hasta realmente ir consiguiendo una base de datos, de emails, de gente que pueda estar interesada en tu producto y tú les vas comunicando, pues, todos los meses, poquito a poco, oye, mira, pues acabo de recolectar esto, estoy tratando esta planta de esta forma, la estamos utilizando, pon recetas, pon cocineros que las utilicen. Y esa marca va a ir sonando entre toda esa gente que puede ser tus clientes potenciales y en algún momento cuando piense un producto parecido al tuyo dirá, ah, pues mira, aquí está este, ¿no?
Y desde un punto de vista práctico, yo creo que no van a ir a ti de primeras. O sea, vas a tener que ir tú. O sea, aunque sería cojonudo que fuese el cocinero a ver eso y por qué es tan rico y por qué es ahí y tal, sino que al final tiene que llegar allí, porque si no, o sea, no se va a acercar. Es que la gente en el mundo cada vez quiere perder menos el tiempo, que es triste.
Yo comparto
pero,
eso,
sí.
pero lo que veo yo, que el cocinero vende el agricultor. Y el cocinero no sabe cómo trabaja el agricultor, muchas veces. Puede ver el producto con brillo, pero si no va a la finca, no sabe qué ecosistema tiene la finca, cómo ha vivido esa planta.
Pero igual tienes que hacerlo más fácil.
Sí,
o sea, como
sí,
dices
te
tú,
entiendo,
un iPad, muy sencillo, pero, o sea, Mahoma tiene que ir a la montaña, o sea, hay que ir. No van a llegar ni para Dios los clientes a tu finca, en nuestro caso, o donde sea, es imposible.
Yo lo entiendo, yo no lo veo imposible, yo lo veo en calidad para el cliente, para el cocinero y para el agricultor. Hay que hacer trabajo, pero bueno, lo entiendo, ¿eh? Y estamos así hoy en día, me da pena.
Pero apuesta por marketing.
Sí,
No
es
solo,
marketing.
la mujer del César no solo hay que serlo, sino parecerlo. Bueno, pues si eres tan bueno y no lo dudo, tienes que darte a conocer. Y ahí hay que hacer una pequeña inversión. Es decir, si quieres recoger los frutos, nunca mejor dicho, tienes que hacer una pequeña inversión. Hay que apostar.
Sí, ahora hemos aprendido aquí que hay ángeles no sé qué y historias de estas. Yo soy un agricultor autónomo, he invertido en la tierra y estoy invirtiendo en semillas autóctonas, que no necesita dinero, pero el proceso es muy lento. Y no sé, hay cosas que entiendo y gracias.
I think you need to find like-minded farmers. I mean, you've got two of you sitting beside each other, and both of you are talking about Basque food. But many of, only just as an example, in Ireland, we have a collection of a number of our suppliers have come together and established a cooperative where they deliver each other's products, because one of the most expensive things for them is delivering. And if if 5 of them go into one city in 5 different vans, it's very expensive. So they set up a project called Larder 360, LARDER 360, and it might give you some ideas. But I think one thing is certainly going to the chefs and finding them. I mean, for me, I would be interested in visiting a farm, but I'm a particular type of chef, so you need to find, I suppose, for me, people like me, and then you will find chefs and who you give them your herbs and you go, do you want to see my farm? And I go, yeah, I'd love to see your farm. And that develops more of an experience. And then I think as well as working with other like-minded farmers, and also I suppose finding, I mean, there must be some distribution company that specializes in Basque food that possibly would assist you, rather than just being a distribution company that's going to take all your money. But there are some small companies in Ireland that actually help farmers, as opposed to just sell products. And for me, they're the ones I buy from, because they come to me with products with names, as opposed to this is beef and this is X. They go, these are our farmers that we deal with. And so I think trying to work together as a collective is a really important idea. If you find, I do herbs, I do pork, I do dairy, and then say, well, is there any way we can work together to form some sort of initiative and make the marketing cheaper, maybe, or sell as a collective, where when instead of all of us going into the restaurant, we can have one of us representing 5, and then you get, I suppose, you're able to go to more places. But for me, that would be one of the ideas, is like definitely going in to chefs. I mean, bringing chefs to your farm if it's possible, and showing them the chefs that are interested. And then 3, trying to pair up with different farmers who you're not competing with. So like, don't team up with another herb farmer. But also, as you said, if you have autonomous herbs, of really getting to the story of the uniqueness of your herbs. That's so important for me. If somebody comes into me and says, I have this and it only grows in the west of Ireland, I want it. Straight away, I want it. I haven't even tasted it yet and I want it. So it's really, really important, and that is what chefs want. If you go in and say, this is a herb that only grows in the Basque region, I think any restaurant would say, I want to try this herb. This herb is going to give a uniqueness to my cooking. So definitely knowing your story. You say your product is good, and so then you have that sorted. That's done. You know your product is good. Now you have to create the story around that product to tell people, and then they will be able to communicate it. Like I'll be able to communicate to my customers, and that's really the joy I get in telling people that this is something that is distinct to our region, or this is something that that you can only get here. But it also works, I mean, for when we're selling Spanish food as well. It doesn't have to be something that is distinct. If we have a lovely piece of manchego that's been aged for a particular amount of time, I can tell that to my Irish customers. So you can go both ways with food. But I think your story is the most important thing.
I can say now that in Denmark, the top restaurants, they go to the very good farms today. And they do pop-up kitchens, pop-up restaurants out in their fields or in their barn. And I can say a very good veggie producer, he was in a divorce, and the finances were bad, and his fields were getting messy. And Noma, at that time, the top restaurant in the world, they took their day off, all the staff, and they went out helping him clean out the fields and doing stuff. So, and I totally understand what you say. People need to see the soil, see what happens out there to fully understand. So it is important to do it. But of course, you need to get to them first, because they don't find you if you only have the head in the soil. So if the problem right now is to sell the products, then you need to take a few days off. Maybe leave the fields a little bit, even though it would be nice to have them perfectly trimmed. And then bring the products. Don't bring the tablet. Bring the products. Taste it. See how it is. And if they think it's interesting, bring them out and ask if they can come out and up and do pop-up restaurants or whatever. But it is the future. Restaurants,
the same
farms
with
working together.
The pork. I think not going with everything. As you said, I have 5 autonomous herbs. Make them your forefront. You go in and you say, I have these 5 herbs. I also have fennel and basil and oregano. These are the 5. These are me. These are the 5 herbs I have from the Basque region. I want you to taste these. And then the rest can be your other kind. Same with the pork. These are my best pieces. This is what I can give you the most of. I also have other ones as well. You know?
And I would love to visit your place.
Yeah, there you go. You've got 2 people already.
I think your place sounds absolutely amazing. Is it close to you?
A 30 minutos está de aquí.
Okay.
Y sí.
Que se alarguen.
Sí, podemos hablar más después.
Vale. No, son pues plantas silvestres, ¿no? Que nutricionalmente ya sabréis que son mucho más potentes, pero luego pues siempre mostramos la acedera roja, bonita, decorativa. Pero tenemos aquí la acedera silvestre, nutricionalmente mucho más potente, de sabor, no tiene nada que envidiar, y hay cosas que, bueno, tanto cocineros como agricultores podemos trabajar mejor y que mejore todo. Muchas gracias por la oportunidad.
Thank you very much. I think, unfortunately, we're out of time because we have to continue with Christian Puglisi. So thank you very much to the listeners because of your interesting questions, and thank you very much to you for our very nice tips and advices to our listeners. Thank you very much.